The trial of Donald Trump is winding down. The president looks certain to be acquitted. But was it his lawyers that saved him or a loyal Republican-led Senate? I'm Imran Garda, and today's newsmaker is Donald Trump's impeachment trial. Is only the third U.S. president to face trial in front of the Senate. And for a time, there were some who thought he could be the first to be removed from office. But with the proceedings coming to a close, it looks like the Democrats are going to be left frustrated as Donald Trump is set to remain in office. The U.S. president is accused of abusing his power by pressuring Ukraine into investigating his political rival. Trump has always maintained he's done nothing wrong. But after being impeached in the House, he assembled an all-star legal team to defend him in the Senate. And while it's all but certain Donald Trump will be acquitted, what impact could it have on his bid for re-election? Natalie Perhonen explores.
It's election season in the United States.
Oh, let's vote for Pocahontas. Let's vote for Bernie. Let's vote for Sleepy Joe. He's flawless.
It's shaping up to be one of the most divisive campaigns the country has ever seen.
The Democrats are trying to overturn the last election. We will make sure that they face another crushing defeat, right, in 2020. November 3rd, mark it off.
In 9 months, American voters will decide who will be president for the next 4 years. It's all happening against the backdrop of the impeachment trial of President Donald Trump and his almost certain acquittal this week. The Democrats don't have the numbers to convict the president on charges that he abused power and obstructed Congress. But they've ensured Trump's presidency will forever bear the stain of impeachment.
He has betrayed our national security, and he will do so again. He has compromised our elections, and he will do so again. You will not change him.
This impeachment has added to what was already a polarized political landscape. Trump's approval ratings held steady as the impeachment trial started. 44% of Americans approved of the job Trump is doing as president. Break it down along party lines, and 89% of Republicans approved of the job he's doing, while just 7% of Democrats agreed with them. The question now is what effect, if any, this trial will have on voters come November, and whether it's hardened the resolve of card-carrying members from either side.
And we're down to the final strokes here, but understand, we must come together as a party and beat Donald Trump. That is our job. Yes!
Democrats will confirm their nominee to take on Trump in July, but they'll be starting from the back foot. It appears he's already won the first battle to stay in office. Natalie Perhonen, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now in Washington, D.C. is Bassima Alghussein. She's the CEO of Alghussein Global Strategies and also served as an Obama White House advisor. And Republican strategist and political commentator John Burnett is in New York. Good to have you both on the program. Bassima, it's highly likely he's going to get acquitted. It's highly likely that the Senate is going to say no abuse of power, no obstruction of Congress. How do you feel about that?
I think that we knew from the beginning that the Republicans were working very closely with the White House to continue to prevent the actual justice from occurring. So we've seen that, number one, they haven't allowed witnesses, and that is a huge, arguably in and of itself, example of obstruction of justice. But it was still very important for the House Democrats to impeach the president because of his gross violations of power. We need to set that precedent to protect the Oval Office for the years to come.
John Burnett, is the potential acquittal, hasn't happened yet, but we're expecting it, is it really justice or is it just politics because you guys control the Senate and you're not going to let the team down?
Well, first, I'm glad to know and glad to say that the 2016 election has now come to an end, because the Democrats have vowed since the day President Trump was inaugurated that they would try to impeach him. So that's one fact that is not to be disputed. However, when you look at the case, the Democrats called 13 witnesses. Republicans in the White House provided 28,000 pages of documentation, and there was approximately 190 video clips that they played, and hours of arguments and testimony and things of that nature, all coming to an head. The thing is that the Democrats should have called, if they wanted Ambassador Bolton, if they wanted all these other figures, they should have actually called them in the House, not rely on the Senate to try to prove their case. And I think that was a fundamental flaw. Why? Because they were so focused on a timeline more than actually digging through the information and actually see what kind of case they could put together.
Are you saying that if you were running it, you would have been able to get this president impeached? The Democrats just messed it up.
No. The thing is, we should not dictate the outcome. We should actually let the fact pattern develop. And the fact pattern didn't lead to any facts. That's why we didn't see any crimes noted in the 2 articles of impeachment in terms of abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. The thing is that, you know what, the president exercised his rights. We live in America, right? We have constitutional rights, and President Trump was not afforded the opportunity in the House to call his own witnesses and to also voice his own defense. That was actually really a modern day lynching in the House.
Okay, I mean, I think it sounds somewhat offensive to, especially people of African American descent, such as yourself, to compare this to a lynching when people were actually physically lynched in the past. This president looks like he's doing okay. Don't you think? Lynching.
Well, let me use a point of history. It was Justice Thomas that first used that terminology during his hearing, during the Anita Hill trials, right? So while it might be offensive to some, I think it's appropriate in terms of when you actually try to bring a case against someone that's really not strong, really not corroborated, and for the fact that they actually said for the last 3 years that they were going to impeach the president without any case, without any evidence, without any information. So I think it's a viable term.
He's not going to be impeached, but as somebody within the Republican Party, as somebody who looks at the action just analytically, the fact that you can call up the president of Ukraine and say, hey, I'm going to hold up some of this military aid unless you investigate my political opponent, Mr. Biden. Do you think he should have done that? Do you think it was wrong, maybe?
I think the way you just worded it was actually inaccurate. We should actually go back and read the transcript because he separated the ask from the aid. That's the reason why
his own lawyers are saying that he hinged the aid on that.
Did not. No, but the
Jay
point
Sekulow,
is,
Alan Dershowitz, his own lawyers in the Senate are saying
it was on the same phone call.
But the point is, the president of Ukraine clearly stated that there was no quid pro quo, there was no pressure, and the aid got to them before the deadline.
Okay.
Those are the facts. That's the fact pattern. And Dershowitz also claimed that you can't if you analyze past actions by presidents.
Is that the president used his position as leader of the United States federal government as a federal employee while he was on the phone with another foreign leader representing this country in his formal capacity as president of the United States. He asked that his political opponent be investigated and that it be public. So that is beyond just investigating corruption. And I heard Mr. Dershowitz on the Senate floor last week arguing that presidents have the ability to withhold aid all the time. And he gave the example of Palestine and Israel. He said that if Israel was continuing to build settlements, which they are, the president would have the right to withhold U.S. aid to Israel in order to get them to stop. That is not an actually correct comparison or analogy to what the president did. As a former White House employee myself, we know that never in our official capacity, for example, if I'm sitting in my office at the United States federal government, whether that's at the Department of Energy or the United States Congress, I am never allowed to use that telephone, that computer, anything that I'm doing in my official duties to help anyone on their campaign. When I was an employee at the Department of Energy, we were not even allowed to have campaign stickers on our cars parked in the parking lot in the Obama administration. So the fact of the matter is that in his official capacity, while sitting in the Oval Office of the United States of America, he asked a foreign leader to investigate his personal political opponent. That is completely separate from just a standard withholding aid because they're not complying with some other U.S. policy position. And he clearly abused power, and the Republicans are absolutely working with encouraging this obstruction of Congress by not allowing further witnesses to come to light. The fact of the matter is, Adam Schiff, while in the House, called over 20 witnesses from President Trump's team to testify. None of them showed up. So to say that the president wasn't allowed to have his defense is ridiculous.
Okay, so
his people just completely didn't show up.
So
that was
John,
up to them.
So, John, you mentioned that the Democrats,
that's
especially in the
false,
House,
and that's
brought forward
inaccurate
all these
completely.
witnesses, right? Listen, why not have one more in the Senate? Why not John Bolton? Because we didn't know about his book a few weeks ago, but we learned about his book very recently. If the president's case is so strong, why not have Bolton come forward and have his say?
The book has nothing to do with this, right? Ambassador Bolton's name was actually floated around in the House during the impeachment process. So for you to actually mention a book is actually false and misleading.
Well, the White House is saying you cannot publish this thing because it challenges our national security.
They had every opportunity to call any witness that they wanted to, including the whistleblower, right? But they chose not to. Why? Because they knew President Trump would actually invoke his constitutional right, to make sure that he can vote, exercise his right to executive privilege.
That's not true. President Trump threatened potential witnesses with litigation and lawsuits if they came forward and testified. I mean, he's been publicly bullying and manipulating and essentially blackmailing people in order to prevent them from testifying. He exercised his constitutional right, and
the Democrats knew that this was going nowhere because they didn't have a case. And they also knew that the two articles of impeachment failed to identify a crime. There's a reason why they stopped using quid pro quo. There's a reason why they stopped using certain verbiage. Why? Because they knew their case is flawed, fundamentally flawed, and didn't have any crimes noted. If you want to actually call this abuse of power, we could actually go back and look at the 2016 election. The Russian hoax
in order to support his own
the Russian hoax was used by the Democrats to try to damage President Trump during the 2016 election and thereafter, and now they're using impeachment. Why? Because clearly the House reps actually stated if they don't impeach President Trump and have him removed from office, he's going to get reelected. That's the reason why the Democrats are actually launched this. And they already said, if this one fails, we'll try another one.
The Democrats from the beginning, that's not true at all. The Democrats from the beginning we have all been aware that it was highly unlikely in the Republican Senate that he would actually be dismissed. Okay, well, Representative Green doesn't speak for the entire Republican Party, and he isn't the person who initiated the impeachment hearings.
Okay, listen.
All of us were aware and
He's
the
first one that filed articles of impeachment.
Okay, so hold on for a second. Okay, so John believes that the Democrats have been... Okay, John believes the Democrats have been on a witch hunt from the beginning to try and get the president impeached at all costs. I'm glad that the two of you both mentioned Dershowitz a bit earlier on. Full disclosure, and this is very annoying, we were going to have him on the program. We were all set up to have him on the program. I was really looking forward to it. He didn't take our calls with about 5 minutes to go. We don't know where he is. Hopefully, I mean, there's still some time left. Hopefully he'll show up, right? But I wanted to pose a couple of things to him.
That seems like a very typical Trump employee move.
Okay,
they
I mean,
don't
look,
show up.
listen, maybe he was caught up. We don't know, right? Okay, maybe there's some legitimate excuse. Nevertheless, there was something that he said on the Senate floor last week, Wednesday. John, I'm curious to know your response to this. Let's have a little listen to his concluding remarks first.
It would be a much harder case if a hypothetical president of the United States said to a hypothetical leader of a foreign country, unless you build a hotel with my name on it, and unless you give me $1 million kickback, I will withhold the funds. That's an easy case. That's purely corrupt and in the purely private interest. But a complex middle case is, I want to be elected. I think I'm a great president. I think I'm the greatest president there ever was. And if I'm not elected, the national interest will suffer greatly. That cannot be an impeachable offense. Thank you, Mr. Chief Justice.
So, John Burnett, so as long as I want to be reelected and I think it's in the public interest as the president, I can abuse power and I can cajole and bully the Ukrainians, and it's not impeachable. That seems to be the most realistic interpretation of those concluding remarks.
But first, that's not actually what he said. He was actually using a if, which is a hypothetical. In this situation, it is clear, it is conclusive, right, that there was obvious corruption in the Biden camp. Obvious. Such that the Democrats don't want that to be reviewed and investigated. Everyone knows that Hunter Biden has no oil and gas experience. Even Hunter Biden himself said that he would not have been on that board if his last name wasn't Biden. I mean, and it's clear from the videotape that Vice President Biden gave a quid pro quo to Ukraine.
Would any of the Trump children be where they are today if their last name wasn't Trump?
But the point,
I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous. No, and actually, the reason why Hunter Biden is irrelevant in the trial in the Senate is because he's not being tried for corruption.
No,
the trial is against the President of the United States for impeachment.
You are a lawyer.
If corruption charges are brought against,
it was a clear quid pro quo.
President against Hunter Biden in the courts, then he should go testify, and he should definitely, we'll see if charges are brought against him. Charges are not brought against him. These charges are about the president's misuse of power, misuse of his official resources, official U.S. tax dollar resources, not his campaign funds, in order to influence the actions of a foreign leader for his political benefit. And it's very clear it was a political benefit because he wanted it to be public. He also wasn't talking about corruption writ large. He was saying specifically Hunter Biden, Hunter Biden, Hunter Biden. So in the same phone call, we have the two actions happening concurrently. And then the only reason why the aid was released was because the Democrats called him out on it. And don't forget that the initial transcript from the call was erroneously put in a highly secure database in the White House, which it didn't need to be. It should have been in a more publicly
so let me ask John Burnett about that.
So they tried to cover it up.
Okay, so let's ask John about that.
The crime is in the cover-up.
Okay, so John, you have Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman,
unbelievable,
the top Ukraine advisor on the National Security Council. He went up the chain. He said, I feel there's something fishy about this call. The response was to put the transcript in a more secure server, not to respond to his concerns. It was to add a few more layers of secrecy to it. That didn't concern you at all?
Not at all. Look, the thing is that we can't actually be overly concerned about people's feelings. Each and every one of those witnesses actually was giving testimony on hearsay, presumptions, no facts. And the counterpart in this
That's
segment
not true.
is an
They were
attorney, I
giving
believe.
testimony based on their years of experience serving the people of the United States of America and recognizing what kind of behavior is appropriate and what kind of behavior isn't
Years of
appropriate.
experience is not fact.
Excuse me, I've been through White House ethics training. Have you been through White House ethics training? It's part of your job training.
This segment.
You're not allowed to do certain
Look, I'm the youngest of 7. We could talk at the same time for as long as you want.
Have you personally been through it?
But the point.
Okay, well, you haven't personally been through it, so you don't have that experience to draw on. It's very clear what you are and not allowed to do.
They haven't proved the case. The thing is that there is no fact pattern here. There is no conclusive evidence because the Democrats have failed to prove their case.
Okay.
And it is an absolute
because the witnesses
lie
don't
that
show up.
That you're purporting.
The
because
witnesses
from the
don't
very
show up
beginning,
because the
from
President
the very
of the United States of
beginning,
America
they've
is
been
threatening them with litigation
they've been trying to attack
do.
this president because this president is making sure that he's putting American interests first.
Okay, let me take a step back for a second. John, let me take a step back for a second, right? Let's set aside the legal arguments, whether this is about abuse of power, high crimes and misdemeanors, obstruction of Congress, and so on. Let's just put it aside for the moment. Let's talk about politics, right? And let me come to you, Bassima. The president has presented this as a political persecution, as a witch hunt, as a lynching, as John even said. And now he's going to be acquitted by the Senate. It's election season. He's undoubtedly going to be strengthened by this, and he can turn to his base and say, they threw whatever the hell they could at me, and I came out unscathed. Are you worried as a Democrat that the president is now strengthened ahead of the election at the end of the year?
I'm not, because I think initially, I mean, again, speaking as a member of the Democratic Party, you know, many of us were aware that Mitch McConnell probably wasn't going to ultimately remove the president from office. But at the same time, there's the long-standing historical and legal precedent that we set for what kind of behavior is tolerated and what kind of behavior isn't. And it's very important that the standards that we are trained when we become federal government employees, and specifically White House government political appointees, which is in a different caliber, that these ethical rules are held to everybody. And that's what the rule of law is. That's the basis of the United States Constitution, that we do not have kings here, no one is above the law. And so it is very important that the House impeached the president, and whether or not he's acquitted doesn't matter. It still is on the books that if you behave that way, you will be gone after. And I think that is an important historical precedent for the future of democracy, whether that be a Republican or a Democrat who commits those kinds of activities.
What difference does that make if he gets 4 more years as president? How has that impacted him or tarnished him at all? He doesn't care about it sitting on his resume, does he?
I mean, well, first of all, I would hope that he not do any single thing even close to that again. I'm really tired of hearing the excuse like, oh, well, he didn't mean that, or the president didn't know. I mean, are you kidding me? I would have been fired in a second. The first thing that they tell you when you go through the White House ethics training is that saying, oh, I didn't know is not an adequate excuse. Like, you are required to study all of the rules, remember them, and to act according to them. It's absurd. And then I think we've seen, continued abuse of power by several different people in the White House using their official capacity. I mean, I will never forget when Kellyanne Conway, the first year in office, is sitting in the official White House press briefing room, and she says on live TV, "Go buy Ivanka Trump's clothing line. It's a great line." You in no way, shape, or form are supposed to use your official office for private benefit in any way, shape, or form. You never, while sitting there speaking as a representative of the White House, inside the White House with the seal of the White House behind her, she's advocating that people go purchase
Can we
Trump
move on?
goods.
Okay.
So we have seen this
But John,
we have seen
this is what you've accused the Bidens of doing, right? right?
I mean,
You've accused
she's
the Bidens of using
yeah.
politics for business.
filibustering the entire segment.
Yeah, but John, she's giving an
Sorry?
example of people using political power for business interests.
There is no.
It's what you were talking about with the Bidens.
Or for
there's
personal
no
gain,
greater-
any kind of personal gain.
Okay, wrap us up, John.
There
John,
is
we
no-
have a
there
minute
is
left on the
no-
program. Wrap us up.
There is no greater example than the Clinton Foundation.
Okay.
The fellow panelist is a complete hypocrite and political hack, and that's all
Which
she's
they
doing.
dismantled.
She's
They
not being fair
dismantled
and
the
accurate
Clinton
and balanced.
Foundation.
This is bogus.
That's not true at all. When I
This
was a
is
White House
ridiculous.
I got a bit
appointee, I
worried
had
when
my
you-
own
when
company
you
before
pulled
I
out the
became
big
a White
B.
House
It
appointee. They didn't even let me have a website.
that the Democrats
The Obama
only wanted
administration didn't
impeachment.
even let me
They
have
just
a
wanted
website.
impeachment.
Today, the
Okay.
Trump Hotel hosts every single foreign
Okay, I've gotta
government
wrap.
reception or
Obama's
party
AG
that occurs in
blocked
Washington,
more
D.C.
Okay,
requests
John and Bassima, listen.
than the Trump administration.
We're going to drop off air in a few seconds. It's been a pleasure talking to both of you. Pity Alan Dershowitz couldn't join us. I was really looking forward to that, but it was good to talk to both
He
of you.
didn't
Thanks so
show
much.
up. Typical Trump employee. They don't show up.
Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you for watching. See you next time.